So the academic year is about to kick off again. So it is time to take you through my 2023 update on the best student current accounts. I'll be talking, of course, about the freebies, and that might be what you first notice when you're looking at these different bank accounts, but they aren't the main reason to be getting one of these accounts. The big reason, as we'll detail in a minute, is probably going to be a 0% overdraft. So I'll take you through not just why they're important, but also each of those different accounts, what they offer in terms of overdrafts and those freebies as well. But I'd also want to talk about non-student current accounts very briefly as well, because there's no reason why you can't have one of these in addition. And in fact, it could be really good for your money to do just that. Have a student account and have another account for your spending and, importantly, your budgeting. So let's talk about these student current accounts. What makes them different to the other accounts you can get elsewhere? Well, the big difference is, as I mentioned before, the fact that you can get a rather sizable 0% overdraft with these accounts. An overdraft, for those of you who don't know, aren't aware of it, you're basically, the bank has given you a load of cash to borrow. You are borrowing it, right? You will have to pay it back, but they're letting you have it at 0% interest free. You will not have to pay money on any of the overdraft that you use, which is different to if you have a credit card where you will be having to sort of pay back, 20%, 25% interest on anything that you spend on that card. Different to overdrafts in non-student accounts where the amount of interest is a massive 40%. Absolutely huge. So this is a way that you can borrow money, additional money, have it in your account so it's there for when you need it and not get charged anything for the duration of your degree. When you graduate, you'll also get a smaller overdraft. The amount you'll have at 0% will get smaller, but in a graduate account, it will start to go down. So you have a little bit of time afterwards to pay it off before the interest starts getting added on. So you will want to only use this for spending that you need to make. This is not about using this cash to have some great night outs or get all the latest gear or go on a big old holiday in the summer and go to all the festivals. They are things that if you can afford them, great. If you can't afford them, then you shouldn't be using your overdraft for those. Okay, this is about getting you through university. And you might be thinking, well, I don't want this at all. I don't want any more debt that I'm going to have from the student loans and the fees and everything already. And that is kind of commendable. That is kind of how I think all of us would try, and a great way to approach your student years. And then afterwards as now, don't borrow things that you don't need to. The problem you've got is, unless you are maybe living at home and you're getting a huge amount of parental contributions, the good chances, even your student loan, even a job that you might have, they are not going to be enough to cover all your expenses for the duration of your degree. Maybe they will, and fingers crossed you won't need to use it. But in all likelihood is, if you're going to need to borrow, then you should be borrowing at 0% with a student current account. So that's why they are really important to go for one of these as a student over anything else. Now, you might be worried about that. You might be thinking, hang on, but if I've got access to this money, I might actually spend it. Well, there are ways around that as well. And this will also come back to in a minute, a separate spending account that you can look at. But it's nice to have it there as a buffer, even if you're not going to use it. And even if you're sort of like, well, actually, no, I'm not going to use it. I don't want it. I'm not going to get it. Full stop. I don't even need it as an emergency. I'm absolutely fine. You could also consider getting these overdrafts and doing something called stoozing. Now, I've got a separate video talking about stoozing in relation to 0% credit cards, but the same kind of principles are going to be involved with student accounts if you want to stooze them. Again, this is next level stuff, so most of you probably won't be doing this. But this is where you would take your overdraft that you've got at 0%, let's say it's £1,000, you take it out of your student account and you put it into a separate savings account, which right now at the time we're recording this, you could get 5% easy access. That £1,000 sitting in that account for a year will earn you 50 quid. I know that's not earth-shattering, but it's 50 quid, right? It's better than nothing. So you could do that. My main tip for you is if you do want to stooze your student overdraft is to put it in an account that is easy access. So you can get that money out at any time that you need it. If you put it in a regular saver or a fixed savings account or a notice account, which might give you slightly higher rates, the danger there is you won't be able to access the cash if an emergency comes along. So looking at easy access account, making a bit of money from you. But as I said, that is probably next level. For most of you, getting this overdraft is going to be about ensuring you can survive without accruing even more very expensive debts via different methods. Now, when you are looking, and I'll take you through in a moment the different kind of overdraft options with different accounts. But first of all, a few things to know about it. Often, the amount you get is spread out over either terms or years, and it kind of gets larger as you go along. So you might get, I don't know, £500 in the first term, £1,000 in the first year, up to £2,000 in the second year, and so on. And that, I think, is quite good when the banks do that, because it does help you kind of avoid that kind of, if you are someone who's like, remember this is the first time you're away from home for a lot of you, that kind of, temptation to spend the money because it's sitting there. If it's not there, you can't spend it, right? So that is one thing to look at. How do they spread it out? Is it all in one go right at the beginning of year one, it's going to last you 3 years, or does it increase as years go on? And you might feel, however you are personally, which one is best for you. Also, some of the terminology, some of the language used says up to. So maybe it says up to £2,000. That means you might not get that full amount. You might get a lower amount. Now, I imagine for a lot of you as students, hopefully that isn't going to be, if you need the larger amount, they give it to you. And they have all sorts of things why they'll look at that and why they'll make that consideration as what you can get. But again, bearing in mind that if you are worried about not getting the full amounts on some of these things, you might want to go for one which is guaranteed of a set amount, although those ones tend to be smaller anyway, so you might be better off, even if you don't get the full amount on the up to overdrafts, you may well be kind of likely to get more anyway, even if it's not the full whack. So they're important things to remember about the overdraft. I just want to say it again, just remind you again, because I did say it before, but it is so important. You will pay this money back at some point. So when you're undergraduate, that's fine, have it there. Use 0%, and it says that you go to the graduate account, and that amount that you borrowed will start to get smaller. And that's when you want to start paying it back when you graduate. And you want to make sure you have cleared it completely before that 0% goes completely. Because I say with 40%, that is very, very, very expensive. So not to be sort of taken lightly, but I think for many people, it is going to be a lifeline. So we'll come back to which ones are the best ones there. But I do also want to talk about a few other aspects. And one of the other things you might probably going to be most sort of initially tempted by are those freebies that you get. And a lot of the banks are giving hard cash this year, £100 from about 4 or 5 different banks, which is yours. You do have to meet a few criteria, and I will list them, and I have already listed them over on becleverwithyourcash.com. That's my website where we've got more details about, in fact, individual reviews of all these student accounts, but also the terms and conditions, how to get that freebie each time. So make sure you are aware of what you have to do. And a lot of them will say you can only get this in your first year of university. So it's not like, if you've seen some of my other videos, the bank switching deals, you can get one and switch the other and switch the other and switch the other. That's generally not going to be the case with these student accounts. You choose the one you get, and that's the only one you're going to be able to have. You also, this is incidental one, but you can't have more than one student account most of the time. Most of them will explicitly say only one student account. But anyway, back to these freebies. Most of them will give you hard cash, and I think that is the best option because you can choose how to spend it. As we'll see later on, you can also get a free railcard. You can also get little extras tacked on top of that. And they are maybe ones to consider if the overdraft works for you and the other features of the bank account work for you. But I certainly wouldn't be driven by those little bits and pieces, other extras over anything else. The last thing to talk about before we get into the main different current accounts is something I mentioned at the top. And that is that you do not, although you can only have one student account, it doesn't stop you having another current account elsewhere. And I actually would then look at doing this. I think this is a good way of managing your money. So let's say you've got your student account with the overdraft. And that's the one that your student loan comes into. That's the big kind of one where the money kind of sits, right? Then to help you budget, I would, whether you're doing weekly or monthly, probably I imagine weekly is the best way of doing this. You would work out how much money you can afford to spend in that week, and you would transfer that to a different account. And you only spend on that account. Now, obviously, if something happens and you need more money, you can go back to the other account. They all have apps. You can transfer it across. But that bit of friction will also make it a little bit harder for you to kind of overspend. In this other account, there are a few that I would particularly recommend. And they are Chase, Starling, or Monzo. The reason I recommend those 3 accounts, well, there's a few reasons. First of all, there's something called a soft credit check on those accounts, which means it's going to be a lot easier for you to get them. The student accounts will have something called a hard credit check, and that will appear on your credit report. And at 18, assuming you are 18 and not an older student, then that will shouldn't be a problem because you'll have a very thin credit report, which means you don't have much of a credit history. But even so, I think it's better, rather than sort of applying for another account elsewhere, going for one of these other accounts which has a soft check as your additional one, because it's not another mark on your credit report. But more important than that in lots of ways is that these are all digital banks that have been designed from the beginning to be used on our phones. And they have loads of extra features, although lots of other banks are copying them, all these extra features which make it a lot easier to track your money and to budget. So you can go in and you can put in things like, my budget for this week is £100, and it will count down how much money you've got left for that week or for that month, whatever it might be. Really easy to understand. Again, much, much easier for you to kind of really keep across those kind of very, very low budgets that you are going to have, the little amounts of money you're going to have against all those different costs. Out of the three of them, my pick is probably going to be Chase Bank, simply because you'll also earn money on your spending. You'll get 1% cash back. It is capped at £15 every single month. But even so, that £1 cash back, 15 quid a month potentially, that will add up over the year. A nice little extra cash you can have on top of, so it might not be 15, up to £15 that you'll get back. But that on top of the free money you would have got from the student bank account, and potentially if you're still using some of your overdraft, some savings money on top of that. So again, I'm not going to go into detail on those because they aren't specific student accounts. They do not have those 0% overdrafts, but certainly I would think about having that as your spending account and keeping the rest of the money in those main student ones. So let's have a look, shall we? Let's have a look at those different accounts. Now, I've got a rough order for these, but I mean, effectively you can argue the case for any of them. The first one I've got here is the Natwest or RBS student account. Basically, it is the same account at both banks. Okay, they're the part of the same group, but one's Natwest and one's RBS, but I put them in the same box here. So this one has an overdraft of up to £500 in the first term, up to £2,000 in the first year, and then a bit of a jump. But then when you get to the third year, you can ask for that to be extended up to £3,250. And this is the potentially, again, it's up to potentially the largest overdraft you're going to get over the duration of your degree. And if that is the most important thing, to have that little extra buffer, then that is going to be probably your best one to go for. It has a freebie, as I said, £100 cash, which is great. This one also has a 4-year taste card thrown in on top, which although I wouldn't choose this account because of that extra, if you've got it, why not have it? And you don't have to use it, but it's there to give you 50% off in restaurants. Again, it's not one that you might not ever use it, but it's worth having it as part of this freebie. Now, as I said, there are some other kind of conditions about when you can get this and stuff. I'm not going to go in detail on this video, but we have a full article over on becleveryourcash.com with this and the other ones, which does explain more about those different options. The next one is the Flex Student Account. Now this one, overdraft-wise, is pretty decent. Again, up to £1,000 in the first year, up to £2,000 in the second year, up to £3,000 in the third year. And this is obviously, as I said before, worth reiterating it with all of these different overdrafts. This is not an additional overdraft each year. It's extending, it's increasing the size of that overdraft as we go along. So this one, I quite like the fact that it's breaking it up, £1,000 effectively for you to spend each academic year. So you're not spending too much early on or having to wait too much for later on. Again, though, it is up to. So you have to bear that in mind and say that up to, you might not get the full amount. You will have to ask for this each academic year for it to be increased. Now, this one also has a cash offer, just £100, no extra freebies on top of that. But that's no bad thing. Again, I don't think those extra bits and pieces on top of the cash are necessarily going to be that useful, but £100 will be useful, absolutely. Now, the reason why, personally, if I was a student, I'd be going for this one over some of the others, even though that overdraft is slightly less than what you get with the Natwest one and ones we talk about in a moment, is that if you are worried about the ethics of your banking, or just broadly ethics in all kind of sort of spending and consumer activities, Nationwide is going to be one of your best options here, because Nationwide isn't a bank, it's a building society. That means it's owned by its members, which means any money that it makes, any profits that it makes, well, it's not going to shareholders. It's going to go either into improving the mortgage or savings rates for its customers, or potentially for some account holders, giving a reward out every single year. You might not be eligible for that one, but even so, it's doing more with its money to support its members. Whereas other banks, well, their kind of money that they make goes to shareholders. It's going to invest in fossil fuels. It's going to invest in arms manufacturing, all those kind of things. It's an interesting thing that you want to read more about. You absolutely should look into it. But then if you are worried about that, then Nationwide is probably the best one because it has a decent overdraft and a freebie. The other kind of ethical option you could look at, which we won't talk about in detail in this video, is the Cooperative Bank student account. But you don't get any freebies with that one necessarily. But certainly Nationwide Flex Student is definitely one to consider. Now, this third one to tell you about is the HSBC student account, and the overdraft and the freebie are very, very similar to what you would get with that Nationwide account. So up to £1,000 in year one, up to £2,000 in year two, up to £3,000 in year three, and you get £100. It's also, though it's not listed there, you also get a year's free subscription to the meditation app Headspace. Now, that sounds very nice. I think it's worth like 30 or 40 quid. If you were going to buy it anyway, that's something you definitely wanted, then maybe it's worth considering. But actually, would you use it? Could you get the same content for free just on podcasts or YouTube or something like that? Maybe. So again, I wouldn't sort of necessarily make that sway you to choose an HSBC over the others. But again, decent up to overdrafts and a decent welcoming offer. Now, the last one to tell you about here is a little different to the others in terms of the freebie and also in terms of the overdraft. This is the Santander 123 student account. Now, this one, the overdraft, is guaranteed in the first year to be £1,500. You will get that whatever happens. There's no up to. You have guaranteed £1,500. But that will last you for the entire 3 years of your degree. If you have a slightly longer degree, a 4-year or 5-year degree, then it will increase as long as you are still studying. But there is kind of thing, as I said at the beginning, to weigh up. Do you want the potential for a larger overdraft but no guarantee? Or do you want to be like, no, I've got £1,500, just making sure you manage it carefully so you don't splash it all out in the first term or first year, because otherwise there's nothing left for years 2 and years 3. Now, the freebie here is not cash. This is a 4-year railcard. I'm sure you know already. Railcards, they give you a third off train travel, although not necessarily at peak times. But if you go in a student, hopefully got more flexibility, they will save you money on your travelling. But this rail card, they say it's worth £100, a 4-year card. That's because a 3-year one costs you 70 quid, and an extra year on top of that will cost you 30. So £100 in total is the same as what you got if you had cash. I'd actually, if I'm thinking about what bonus I want a rail card. I wouldn't be swayed by Santander, because if you've got £100 from a different account, you can buy a rail card for 30 quid. You could buy a 3-year one for 70 quid if you wanted. You can find special offers that do run regularly, which might get you 25% or to a third off those rail cards, bringing the price down. So I actually would be thinking, this isn't the one for me in terms of freebies, because I can get that same thing elsewhere if I choose to, if I want to, maybe even for less than a bit of cash left over. Now, there are a couple just to quickly round up here. There is £100 cash available from both Natwest and Lloyds. The overdraft, though, it is going to be a lot smaller, which is why not one of my top 4 picks, up to £1,500 over the duration of the degree. So you might decide you want to go with Lloyds or Halifax for other reasons, but personally, I think they're kind of 5th and 6th place. Below that, Barclays, again, their overdraft, much smaller than the others, up to £1,000 in years 1, up to £1,500 in years 2 and 3. So substantially less than we're getting from those other accounts. You do get a freebie with this. It's a year of something called, let me get this right, Palego. Palego is basically a textbook version, digital, Spotify of textbooks. That's how they say it. So you can go on there and you can read all these different textbooks. Now that could save you some money in the long run. But you can obviously, if you want it, you could buy it for yourself separately. And obviously you will have libraries at a university that you can go into and use, and other resources that might be available. So I personally don't think it's worth doing it for that. And a couple more just to quickly tell you about right at the end here. TSB, moment no freebie going on with them, and the co-op no freebie. The only reason I say you might want to consider the co-op again is if you are after an ethical student account, and it'd be down to them and Nationwide as your alternatives. So they are the top student current accounts. Remember, over at becleverwithyourcash.com, we have got reviews of all those leading different accounts, more details about how they work, what you need to think about, how you are eligible for them, how to apply, what you might need to do to get those freebies. So do head over to the site for more information on all of those. But otherwise, best of luck with university. Hope it all goes well for you. My name is Andy Webb. Make sure you check out these videos here for more ways to help you with your finances.